Welcome. Hopefully you can hear me well. I know many folks in this room, so I won't give you the long rendition of my career because we haven't got time. I'm Dennis Kelly. I'm representing FleetPartners. I mentioned upstairs our business is all about fleet. We've got 100,000 vehicles pan-Tasman on lease and or fleet management. We've been in business 40 years. We started in New Zealand down in Christchurch. Purpose of today obviously is to talk about New Zealand Post and their journey to zero carbon emissions. We've been a supplier to New Zealand Post for 20 years and in that time, most of the time it's been with Paul, I think, Paul, not quite. Yep. However, it'd be fair to say the last 5 years have been by far the way more interesting part of that with the journey to EV, and I'm not about to steal Paul's thunder. So I'm going to kick off shortly with a couple of framed up questions that these two are going to talk to, and then we'll throw it open to the floor for questioning from there. I should point out that Paul and I do go a long way back, and this guy's an absolute expert when it comes to the assets. This journey that Post has been through very much mirrors what we're delivering to our customers around transitioning to low CO2 or zero carbon footprint with their fleet and the challenges that are along the way. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Chad and to Paul to introduce themselves.
Great. Hey, thanks Dennis, and thank you everyone for joining today. As Dennis said, my name's Chad Foley, and I'm an Environment Projects Manager at New Zealand Post and sit within the sustainability team there, and primarily work in our planet pillar. So we've got plans here to decarbonise our business and work quite closely with Paul Booth and by extension Dennis at FleetPartners. So thank you.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. I'm Paul Booth. I'm the Transport Logistics Manager for New Zealand Post. My role is to integrate vehicles into New Zealand Post fleet, and a key part of that is how do we decarbon our fleet and how we manage the transitions so that we get on board support from both our leadership team and also the actual drivers. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But there's me been known Dennis almost since day one, so I've been with the business for over 30 years and within transport for over 20 years. So got a good understanding of how transport should work, and yeah, we've had a few good discussions over the years, but yeah, we're really good to partner with such a good organisation that is able to help us along this journey.
Fantastic, thanks Paul. I guess first question up, part of the process is figuring out what the end game is in terms of what your fleet emission objectives and strategies are, and how you guys went about setting that.
Sure, so I'll talk a bit to that. So as a business, we've got a goal to be carbon neutral by 2030, and so that original goal stems back to 2017, where we as a company with a board and CEO and key stakeholders within the business came up with that goal. And then to really understand how we're going to achieve that, we established a science-based target, which will see us reduce our footprint by 32% based on a 2018 base year. And so really a science-based target sets best practice on actually how you achieve your decarbonisation goals. So with Post, we have 4 focus areas. So one is on our last mile fleet, particularly to achieve a 25% reduction in emissions by 2025. A second focus area is on our lease and own fleet, which Dennis has been helping us with. So again, it's achieving a 100% EV target by 2025. And then we're also looking at our heavy freight as well. So a 10% reduction there by 2025 as well. The interesting thing about our heavy freight is that it makes up about a quarter of our emissions. We have 106 approximate line haul trucks that go up and down the country, emitting about 25,300 tonnes per annum. And for comparison, our contractor fleet makes up about 1,200 vehicles and they emit about 16,000 tonnes. So real big opportunities there, but we're somewhat limited to what's available in the market, but we work with key stakeholders to see what opportunities there are. And the last focus area is actually on our being a leader in the space and also on engaging our staff. So it's a journey that we'd like to take everyone on board, and we've got a Future Fit project there where we've worked with Auckland Council to engage our staff on the issue of climate change. They can measure their carbon footprints and take actions to reduce it. So that just got released in the last couple of weeks. But yeah, so we've got the 4 focus areas and then our overall sort of carbon goal that sort of funnels to it.
Yeah, that's great, Chad. And just we mentioned earlier on in a previous discussion around data and measuring, your fleet's performance with telematics. Can you talk us through a bit about that?
Yeah, data's hugely significant, and Paul can probably speak a bit more about how it plays. But the thing is, with these transitions and encouraging our contractors to get into EVs, is the last thing we want to do is provide a vehicle that's not fit for purpose. So Paul, looks at the data, how the vehicle's being used, and then based on that provides a vehicle. And we've got a charger strategy as well to support these vehicles. So wherever these vehicles are going, we'll make sure that the right infrastructure is there. And particularly we're putting in a lot of AC charging chargers, and then in key hub locations where they might be travelling from Wellington to Palmerston North, or likewise Auckland to Hamilton and somewhere else, to put DC charging in there so that if they are going to a meeting for an hour or two, then they can quickly juice up and they'll have enough to get back as well. So yeah.
Great, thanks, Chad. And Paul, I know from an asset point of view that this is a place that you've lived and breathed for some time. Can you talk us through over the time how you've migrated, I guess, from various vehicle options and perhaps a view to where you see it heading for the future?
Yeah. Thanks, Dennis. So our journey with EVs started back in 2011, and most of you would remember the Mitsubishi i-MiEV. Okay, so Mitsubishi Motors brought out 5 of those vehicles, and we had the opportunity to test those vehicles back in 2011. What we did is our whole focus is fit for purpose for these vehicles. What can they do? So we monitored the i-MiEV on range, we monitored it on practicality, and also what charging infrastructure that was required for that vehicle at that time. So we had that for 3 years, and we gained some information. Typically it had a theoretical range of just over 100 k's. Reality in our urgent courier space where we had the vehicle, it only achieved around 68 to 70 kilometres. So we knew, okay, we were comfortable, and we had it in the CBD operating in both Auckland and Wellington. Right, so we gathered that information, and that formed the basis of other activities as we moved on. Then we started, which you'll all be familiar with, the journey around how as a business can we increase the capacity of our last mile delivery in I suppose a closing or a reduction in mail volumes. So we wanted to be able to deliver packets as well as mail, and to do that reasonably quickly. So we introduced in 2015 the Paxter that you would be familiar with, the little yellow and red buggies that turn up to your address every other day. And that gave us capacity for the delivery agents to be able to deliver mail as well as small packets. So it meant that we were able to take some of the small packets that a courier would normally deliver and put that into those last mile delivery. So we did a pilot in 2015, And what it showed is, that was a good direction for us at that time. So then we committed to going, right, for us to do that, we need to do a bulk order of these vehicles. They're made in Norway, and we basically put an order in for 450 of them. And that would cater for all our delivery networks right throughout the actual country. So they started getting them from 2016 and integrated them, so they were fully integrated by the end of 2017. So that gave us extra capacity into the delivery network, and it also meant that we were able to not only do parcels but do the mail product as well. So we've learnt a lot. What we did find is that the Paxters were designed in Norway. Our conditions are a little bit different, so we had to go through a journey of customising them and making them safer for our people. So we introduced a dash cam, forward-facing camera. We also introduced a reverse camera for them and a high stop brake light and daytime running lights with them. And what that did is it meant that when they drive on the footpath, and we do have approval to drive on the footpaths both from Council and New Zealand Transport Agency, we made sure we had that covered. But what it enabled us to do is to be more efficient at our last mile delivery in that space. And the next generation of Paxter that Norway have developed has integrated those things that we introduced. And again, that Kiwi ingenuity was a key part of going, hey, this is what you should do next and that. So we move forward because they're all integrated now, and we started moving into the next area, which was our controlled fleet, our passenger vehicles. How do we integrate that? How do we understand how that would work? So then we went out and had a look at what there was around, and at that stage the availability of vehicles was pretty small, but we managed to hook up with Hyundai New Zealand, and they were able to support us with the Ioniq and the Kona. Now what we found is, I said we have a very limited budget, but we want to be on this journey. What can we do? So we had several discussions around it, and they came back and they said, look, what we've got is we've got some demonstrator ones, or some that have got that have been issued to a rental company for 6 months. We can let you have those at a reduced rate, and we agreed a rate there. So what that enabled us to do, because electric vehicles life is significantly longer than normal internal combustion engines, so we were able to put those in at a slightly larger cost than what we would do if we replace it normally. And it gave us the opportunity to test the vehicles in different environments, test the range, and for us to, as Chad had said, what do we need to support the vehicles? Because one of the key things as fleet owners is, how do we make it easy for our people to get into EVs? The easiest solution is to have charging stations at each point. So because we have just under 50 operational sites throughout New Zealand, we committed in a charging strategy to have charging stations at each of those sites. So if you were to pick up the pool car in Auckland to take up to Whangarei, we've got a charging facility in Whangarei. We've got it in Tauranga, Hamilton. So we did what range the vehicle was capable of achieving, and we actually put charging stations in there to enable us to go point to point, so somebody wasn't sitting in a cafe for an hour charging their vehicle up so that they could drive the rest of the way. Now what we did find also is that we put in the Kona, because range anxiety is a big thing out there, and we need to overcome that barrier. To overcome that barrier, we needed to get a vehicle that had the greatest range. So that's why we integrated the Kona, because it achieved 450 to 480 kilometres, and that significantly reduced range anxiety.
I might just add something to that, Paul. Something that's really important is introducing a positive experience and to really get people, supporting these vehicles and things like that. And so actually one of the first things that we did when we got the Kona in the Wellington office was actually just to get staff to test the vehicle. We gave it to a few staff to take, during the night or for the weekend, so that they could actually give the vehicle a proper test. But before we did anything like that, I sat in the passenger seat, they're on the driver's seat. I gave them a bit of an overview of the vehicle so they felt comfortable that how it worked. It is something new. And one of the first questions I always get asked once they press the button is it on? And so from that, really, people have a pretty good experience, and so that's equally important as well. And it's a big focus for us at New Zealand Post. And I might just go back to, Paul mentioned about costs. One of the things that's a bit unique about New Zealand Post is that as part of this decarbonisation project is that we look at the cost of being carbon neutral now, and so then we take that cost and reinvest that into decarbonisation activities. So for example, last year, so basically it's calculated on what our total carbon footprint is and what it would cost to offset. And so so it sits around sort of 1.3 to 1.5. So that means that we can actually walk the talk and take action. And so one of the projects that my work colleague Sam's been doing is on this EV incentive offer for contractors. We know that that's their business and it needs to be viable for them. And so with this incentive offer, we help cover the upfront costs of an EV, recognising that that these EV vans are more expensive. So we help remove that barrier. And then they also benefit from having lower operating costs. So we partnered with Jack at OptiFleet to do a bit of analysis for us, and so that we can sort of understand and give them a bit of information about what some of these savings are. And so, yeah.
Yeah, so just going back to the Kona and doing point-to-point and having a charging infrastructure internally, we could drive the Kona from Auckland to Whangarei and back to Auckland and charge it at Auckland. It would do it in one journey without being charged. It cost the business $7.50 for that journey in fuel. So that is the sort of benefit that you can get. But installing charging infrastructure is expensive. What we recommend is that you have a look at your power supply going into your building and see what the capability is, and install EV chargers close to your switchboard to minimise that cost. It doesn't happen, it is pretty hard, but that's what we've managed to do to get as many as we can installed throughout the country.
And just to add to that, one of the things that we've done as part of our work with ECA and the various projects that we've done is that we've actually come up with a bit of a how-to guide on actually the sort of things that you should be considering when installing EV chargers. And so that looks at a bit of a flow map of understanding what your site capacity is, what sort of pressure are these chargers going to put onto that grid, and then it will give you a bit of an indication as to whether it's going to be a high cost for you or a bit of a low cost. So I definitely recommend having a look at our how-to guide on our sustainability page, and that might also be of benefit to those that are sort of getting into the journey as well.
Yeah, we did a case study on what impact chargers have on a building. So that case study is also available, and that would help you as well. Sorry, Dennis, we're stolen your thunder there.
That's why you guys are here. You mentioned a number of times around staff engagement, and I've got in my mind the Paxters, like bringing those into the country. This is not just about getting someone used to an EV motor car, it's a completely different thing. And I know through the fact that we manage that fleet for you, we're also looking at e-bikes, which I reckon is really cool. We've actually had a number of corporates say to us, asking the question around mobility as a service. and the questions got on the radar about e-bikes, and then what's in our minds is around workplace health and safety. You guys are obviously cutting edge in terms of dealing with staff, getting them used to a fundamental change in how they operate, and the whole workplace health and safety area.
Yep.
What's your views there?
So in terms of health and safety, when we bring a new vehicle or a new mode into the fleet, we have to engage with our safety and wellbeing team. We have to engage with HR training, so that we've got appropriate training for all modes to our people, because if we had an incident and WorkSafe investigated it, if we didn't have training or the proper controls in place, we would be liable. So we need to cover those bases as well. So the likes of the e-bike, which again is supporting Paxter in delivering mail, that's got a range of around 50 kilometres, and we're sort of customising. So we only introduced that about this time last year, and we're gaining knowledge around the actual performance. But there will be more and more e-bikes introduced to support the Paxter fleet, and as we move further forward, one of our biggest things is our courier and contractor network, which is around 1,500 vehicles, vans and utes and that. How do we integrate that into an EV or a more sustainable way? And we're working with key manufacturers on what they're producing or what they're able to bring into the country that meet our requirements in that space as well.
That's great.
Yeah, so just on that as well, so and going back to the importance of having data, one of the things we found is that with the existing models of vans, so if you look excluding the Ford Transit and the likes that have recently come out, but looking at the likes of the Renault Kangoo and the E&V 200 and the likes, those vans are only suitable for less than sort of 5% of our use cases. So we are severely limited to what's available at the moment, and so that's why we work very closely with FleetPartners and other manufacturers to see what's coming out onto the market so that we can better plan, and having this EV incentive offer sort of sitting in the background is also another carrot that we can leverage to help the transition along as well.
That's great, Chaz. I'm just mindful of time. Perhaps if I can throw open to the floor any questions that anyone would like to raise.
Yep. Just a question for you. You've built your business case around pricing carbon that you're actually emitting. Just wondering, from a technical point of view, if you decided to go with NZU, or did you actually go with the carbon markets?
Sorry, what was that?
Can you hear me all right?
Very faint, but a little bit.
Yeah. No.
Unfortunately not.
When you were doing the business case, you were pricing carbon.
Yes.
Did you use NZU, or did you decide to look at the voluntary carbon markets and the pricing that's available there?
Yeah, so good question. So when it came to pricing, my work colleague did the calculations for these, and in terms of who we specifically used, I can't answer that, but we did look at what the cost of a gold standard carbon credit would be, and ideally we'd like to sort of invest in sort of local credits and things like that. But there was a ratio that we used to work out the value of offsetting so that we could have a realistic total carbon fund to invest in low carbon activities.
Yeah.
So that probably doesn't answer your question fully, and but I can follow that up with you if you like.
Yeah. So in terms of our carbon offset, we value that at, like Chad said, $1.3 to $1.5 million a year. To do the offset, but it gave us access to funding to be able to fund vehicles that have a greater impact than just going and planting trees. So from our side, it really gave us a good injection into making a real difference, because you can just plant as many trees as you like, but you don't deal with the problem.
That's right.
on
And
that.
the other thing too is that because our carbon fund is based on a limited supply of carbon credits, we know that these are going to increase in price. And so by not doing anything, we'll have a larger liability sitting there. So that's also a good motivator for change, because if we don't do anything now, then our offset cost is going to be a lot higher.
Yeah, one of the key focuses for us, and within the heavy commercial industry, is our truck fleet, and that's one where we're hoping within the next 12 months we'll have some credible solutions on the road, and that'll make a real impact, because it's a huge emission burner. Basically, you'll take all of our vehicles, both contractor and passenger vehicles, to even come close to where the trucks are. So to give you an idea of the scale in terms of what we've got to find as a solution for the trucks, we've got a number of trucks that operate between Auckland and Christchurch that are doing over 1 million kilometres every 18 months. So that shows you how much we've got to invest in new technology to get those to a zero carbon.
Yeah, well, thanks, Paul. We now have a microphone, so don't be shy. Any further questions? Scared you off? Probably my last question to you both. So, being bleeding edge, certainly leading edge, what sort of mistakes have you come across, or I flip that around the other way? What would you advise somebody that's going into the same sort of journey that you've been through as potential pitfalls to watch out for?
I'd say to really understand the use case for these vehicles, and as well as really making sure that when you build these business cases and things like that, understand what sort of constraints you're operating in, and so just the example of charging infrastructure, that can be a real cost. And so really understanding if you don't have the plans to do an audit, an energy audit, and understand what sort of limitations are present there, and that will really dictate. And it's really, really important to be collaborative, so working with the landlord or key stakeholders and things like that, because if you have to do any trenching or anything like that, laying cables, it gets really expensive and quickly becomes an issue. So I think just really understanding what limitations and constraints you're working in, and if you don't know them, then get those to do audits, and also just understand the use case for the vehicle, because as I said earlier, the last thing you want to do is provide a vehicle that's not fit for purpose, and providing, introducing a negative experience, because these are really great vehicles to use, and I think, and because they are so new, you do want to have a positive experience from the start.
Awesome. Ian, you've now got the microphone.
I feel obliged to use it, which is a worry. Well, there was one other thing. I mean, I don't know your business intimately at all, but in terms of the heavy goods fleet, is hydrogen going to come into the mix there? Have you decided there, or is it just on the technology roadmap and you're waiting?
Yep, watch this space. Yeah. Our CEO and leadership team are committed to find a solution for our heavy commercial fleet. We're not just limited to battery electric. Hydrogen is definitely on the table. We're talking to Hydrogen Association, Hringa. There's a number of organisations that we've got to have a collaborative approach, because it's something that we can't fund on our own. But we want to be a leader in that space that is able to help others within the transport industry transition to that.
That was my next question. So, within the heavy goods transport vehicle sector, logistics, whether or not there are actually strategic partners that you have there in order to pilot some of these schemes together to understand efficiency.
Yes, and I don't want to give anything away because it's still under negotiations. but we are very close to reaching agreement that would satisfy the heavy commercial thing. And any pilot, and we've committed to this right from the get-go, has to stack up. Admittedly, hydrogen is very, very expensive, but if we don't do it, who's going to do it? And being a government agency, we've got to push the government to support us in that, because if we can be a government agency and deliver on the results of reducing the carbon footprint, then that will encourage others to follow us in that path. But we are 100% committed to actually making a difference and to be innovators in that space.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you. Time for one last question. Before I thank these guys, I just want to put in a plug. We've released our new ebook today, which you can download. It's all around transition 5 steps to zero carbon emissions for fleet. We've put a lot of thought into it. A call out to Wedgwood White, who are our electrical engineers we have as consultants to our business. The business is a lot more complex these days than just leasing Falcons and Commodores. And obviously around charging infrastructure and having that capability at hand to help customers transition. So without further ado, just put your hands together for Paul and Chad. Thank you.
Just one last thing to you all. An invitation to come and ask me any questions. We've only just scratched the surface, but we're here to help everybody. If I can help someone here today, then my journey's been worth it. So the invitation's here. It doesn't matter, there's no dumb questions here. This is all about how can we help you to be part of our journey. So thank you very much for allowing us to talk, ramble on, sorry. But it's been a real pleasure to work with FleetPartners, which have provided us some real good tools to move forward on.
Thanks. Thanks, Paul. Cheers.